Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Digital Nomad World Weekly Series. I'm Becky, and I'll be your host. And today we are bringing you another guide to a very popular digital nomad destination. We're going to talk about Hoi An, Vietnam, with our Hoi An expert, Amanda McGrath. Amanda, welcome to the show.
Hi, thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Thank you. I'm so glad to have you here and to hear more about this beautiful place called Hoi An. So, first of all, people might be wondering, Amanda, why are you a Hoi An expert? How did this come about?
It's a good question. And I don't know that I can actually say I'm a Hoi An expert, but I have a lot to say about it. It's a place that's very close to my heart. But a lot of what I know about it came from spending a year and a half there during the pandemic. It's a pretty great place to be riding out a global crisis. And, being there during a tumultuous time has left it very close to my heart. So I think that's where my expertise comes in.
And you also visited it recently at the beginning of this year. So you have gone back since the pandemic to see what has changed. I thought that was very valuable as well.
Yeah, it was exciting. My first visit to Hoi An was back in, I think, 2019. I'd come for a return visit in 2020, stayed for quite a while. And then I was able to go back earlier this year, which was really nice, especially since I had left sort of right as Vietnam was starting to have a harder time with COVID back in 2021. And so being able to see Hoi An sort of coming back to life, all of the tourism is back, the borders are open again. So it was nice to see it sort of thriving in a new way after a difficult time.
Yeah, and we are recording this in June 2023. I got to visit Hoi An myself for the first time in February and March of 2023. And when were you there? When did you leave this year?
This year, that is a good question. I think it would have been early May
Okay.
about then. So I think this time around I spent about 2 months.
Fantastic. So let's get into it. First of all, why Hoi An? Why would you recommend Hoi An to someone who had never been to, let's say, Vietnam? There's
Yeah,
bigger
no,
cities.
yeah, Vietnam is a super cool and interesting and delicious place to visit. Hanoi and Saigon get a lot of the sort of accolades as being like the big exciting parts of the country, but what Hoi An has going for it. So Hoi An is basically a sort of a beach town on the central coast of Vietnam. And it has, if you're sort of a medium to long stay traveler, someone who's going to spend a few weeks to a couple of months somewhere, it's ideal for that. It's just a place where you can feel very at home. The beach is there, which is beautiful. There are sweeping rice field views everywhere, which give it like a very pastoral feel, even though it's a vibrant enough town to have everything you could possibly need: coffee shops, restaurants, culture, art, all kinds of stuff. A charming and quaint old town, which is probably, if you've ever Googled Hoi An, that's what you're seeing in the photos with the yellow walls and the backdrop there. That part of town definitely has its charms, but if you're staying there longer term, you also get to enjoy this whole breadth of what else Hoi An has to offer, which I think makes it very accessible and a very sort of comfortable place to camp down for a while and get to know the country a little bit.
Now, I know we're talking about Hoi An, but I think this is a good time to mention Da Nang as well, because this is how you're going to usually enter the country or enter the place where you can more easily get to Hoi An. So can you just speak really briefly about Da Nang and how it could contrast with your Hoi An experience and how close they are to each
Yeah,
other?
and I've met a lot of nomads who have based themselves in Da Nang instead of in Hoi An. So it's certainly a city that has a lot to offer. It's bigger, has the international airports. If you're coming to Hoi An, you're almost definitely going to be flying into Da Nang at some point, and then it's maybe a like 30-minute drive from the airport into Hoi An proper. And it is sort of what helps make Hoi An very livable for longer term stays, is that you do have access to this bigger city that has all of the sort of, more urban amenities that you need. And so I think that helps sort of keep it from being too small town.
Yeah, I thought that was a great contrast as well. There are people that love Da Nang, there are people who prefer Hoi An. Some of them, like us, I think you've mentioned this, love both, but Hoi An is closer to my heart, and I'm sure you would agree, having spent more time there. So
Absolutely.
let's also talk really quickly about the visa situation for Vietnam. If you're planning to just come straight into Hoi An and that's your first stop in the country, what's the current visa situation for the average tourist coming in?
So that's a good question. And for anyone who's sort of encountering this talk later, you sort of have to check week to week because things with Vietnam can change at any moment. But while I was there this year, they have reopened borders to people from, I'm pretty sure, all countries like before the pandemic. But the visas are only for 30-day stays. So since I was there for about 2 months, I ended up having to do a visa run, spent a really great weekend in Seoul, and then came back for another 30 days. But that is something that you're going to have to look into and investigate based on your own country of origin. I'm an American, so things tend to be slightly easier for me than for people of other nationalities. But yeah, the 30-day limit has its pros and cons right now. And there's a lot of talk that they'll be extending that and going back to some of the pre-pandemic options they have, including 3-month visas and things like that. But you'll have to look into that based on where you're coming from and when you're intending to go.
And don't save it for too close to the time you're going, because I think when I applied, people were telling me, okay, it takes about 3 business days to get it. You apply online, you pay online, so you just are going to show this like document you get in an email. But there, I happened to apply the Friday before a 1 week holiday for the country called Tet, and so it ended up taking 10 days for me to get my visa. And I was very lucky that I went like about 6 weeks before onto the website to get that visa. So yeah, don't save it until right before you leave.
Yes, that is a really good point. And you can, based on the way the online visa approval system works, you'll upload basically your identification and a photo, fill in some information. And then each time I did it, it did take the full 3 days. So definitely bank that time in. The good news is, like you said, if you're planning to go and you know when you intend to arrive, you can take care of the visa stuff well before. It doesn't have to be right at the moment you're planning to fly in. So you can get it taken care of weeks in advance and then have your approval in hand and ready to go.
All right, so let's say we flew into Da Nang, we took our 30-minute taxi to Hoi An, and like you said, there's a number of things to love about Hoi An. Let's talk about transportation within the city. I think this is actually one of my favorite things that I found when I was there. How do we get around the city typically? Do they have Uber? Do they have the equivalent?
Yeah, so you have a lot of options. So to my knowledge, they don't have Uber. When I'm there, I use a very similar app called Grab. Anybody who's been around Southeast Asia has probably encountered Grab at some point. But if you haven't, it's basically the same concept as Uber, rideshare. You can call. The great thing in Vietnam is that you can get both a Grab car or a Grab motorbike, because scooters and motorbikes are a primary mode of transportation to get around Vietnam. And so it is an option for rideshares too. So a motorbike will pull up, give you a helmet, and you hop on the back and go. And usually that's the fastest way if you can get one. I do drive a scooter when I'm there. Your mileage may vary on that. I will say that I would not try to ride a scooter for the first time in Vietnam. If you're planning to use that as your mode of transportation, which I do, and I love it, it opens up so many amazing parts of Vietnam once you do. But the sort of mentality around driving in Vietnam is very different than what a lot of Westerners will feel comfortable with from back home. And so getting used to the rules of the road and the culture of driving in Vietnam takes some getting used to. And I would not try to make that your first attempt to drive a scooter. If you have some experience, you'll be able to get by with it, but make sure you're very aware at all times.
Generally speaking, do you need a license, like a motorcycle license, or just can you just use a normal driver's license to rent a
That
scooter
would be a
there?
great question for your scooter rental company who can tell
Okay.
you what is allowed. I am fairly certain for people who don't have a motorcycle license from their home countries, I'm reasonably certain that you can still drive up to a 50cc motorbike, just like a Cub, which are fairly small but great for getting around town. So that would be an option, I think, for people who don't have any other documentation for it.
I think that's good to know. Now, the reason I loved transportation in Hoi An so much is because I am afraid of driving scooters. I'm still a little nervous. I didn't drive for many years. So I used the bicycle, the free bicycle that my hotel was providing, and it was just fine. Like, yes, it takes more effort, but I like felt okay on the roads and I could get around to do all the things I needed without waiting to call a grab car or even like, getting rides from someone else. It was possible. And that's one thing I really love because there's not that many places in the world that are set up like that, where you can get around on a bicycle and still feel like you're really involved in the community and getting to the co-working spaces and things like that.
Mhm. Absolutely. Yeah. Bicycles are huge in all parts of Vietnam, and they're especially satisfying, I think, in Hoi An because you can go through the rice fields and get this sort of sweeping, quaint views and things. And you will sweat to death a little bit because temperatures are high, but you'll get a workout too. So why not? There's also pretty robust for people who are more. It's one thing to sort of like pedal around town as a way to get around, but there's also a pretty strong cyclist culture for people who are really into bicycles. I have a number of friends there who are very into taking like super long rides through the countryside and things like that, competitions and things like that. So if you're an avid cyclist, you'll definitely find your people there.
Awesome. Okay, let's talk a little bit about the areas of Hoi An. So we have the Old Town, which you mentioned, which has all many historical buildings. We can talk about that in a moment. I found a lot of the digital nomads were staying in an area called Cam Chao. I hope I said that right, but that's between the Old Town and the beach. So do you know of any other neighborhoods or any other popular ones for digital nomads and why they were staying in that area?
Yeah, and I'll apologize in advance to any Vietnamese listeners for how I'm about to just sort of massacre the pronunciations on these, but I think it's close enough that it'll help non-Vietnamese speakers be able to identify what these words actually look like. But yes, so Cam Chao is that sort of neighborhood between the beach and the old town. You get a lot of amenities there. It's easy to get around. There's a lot of housing options. There's also a similar neighborhood called Cam Tan, which tends to have more of this sort of sweeping pastoral rice fields. It's a little bit further out, but still a really comfortable place to stay, and you can get a lot of good deals on housing out there. And then, of course, there's Ambang, which is the neighborhood that's right next to the beach. You'll find a lot of expats base themselves there. There's a lot of bars, restaurants, and of course, the access to the beach is unbeatable. So that's a nice area for a lot of people too. That just makes it a little bit harder to get into town if you're not on a motorbike, but it's still totally accessible. And the last time I was there, I stayed in a very small neighborhood called Tre Quay, which is sort of the vegetable village. So it's a little kind of farming community. It's super pastoral. It's really cute and quiet. I will say that whichever neighborhood you end up in, my recommendation is always to arrive in Hoi An and then look for your apartment or homestay or wherever you intend to stay while you're there. Just so that you can get a sense for what's around it. Vietnam is very famous for its karaoke. So if you pull up and find out that your house is right next to a karaoke bar, you may want to choose another option, and other things too. It is one of those places where you can get a lot of better deals on the ground rather than booking in advance. So my suggestion to anybody going for the first time would be to just book a homestay or a hotel for a couple of days and then find something, just by pounding the pavement once you're there.
When you pound the pavement, are you just going into hotels that look nice and asking at the front desk, like, do you have any rooms available?
That is an option, actually. But actually, maybe the best way to do it, at least these days, is there are a number of really active Facebook groups for expats and for property rentals. So honestly, you can just go in there, post a list of the requirements, what you're looking for in a place, how many bedrooms, which neighborhoods or whatever. And people will reach out to you, and then you'll be able to go take a quick look, make sure it's in a location and has the right sort of amenities or whatever it is that you need in a place. But that tends to be a pretty efficient way to try to find something.
Right. Yeah, I know personally some people who found great places to stay in on Facebook groups. I actually had a recommendation from a nomad that had already gone through and just booked on booking.com based on their recommendation. It was more of a homestay, but I have to shout out Lynn from Sol Villa, spelled like the Spanish word for sun, SOL. She had a really great place to stay. and I was there for about 3 weeks. It was like a hotel room with like a big room and a desk, but she made breakfast for you every morning if you wanted that option. So it always, there's a lot of places in Vietnam that do feel like you're staying with the family, or you have a mom taking care of you for whatever you may need. So I love that.
Yeah, the homestays really give you a very like one-on-one experience with a family, and it varies. Some are more sort of intimate and inclusive and activities and things like that, and others are just sort of, you know, more business oriented. But it is a really lovely way to sort of meet and form relationships with some of the local people, and to learn a lot about town. I've never met a homestay owner who wouldn't, you know, talk your ear off about recommendations on what to do and where to go, and who weren't willing to go the extra mile to help you find transportation or tickets or advice or whatever it is that you need.
Yeah. All right, let's talk about two really important things for digital nomads. First, the internet. How is the internet generally in Hoi An?
Generally good. So I'll say my work is mostly writing and editing. So I don't have quite the same needs that someone who downloads huge files or has to do a lot of live video chats would do. So bear that in mind. But overall, I've found it to be very useful. I will say that sometimes there are outages that tend to be that can be related to power outages in various parts of town, or you know, just countrywide shenanigans, who knows. But I will say, if you have data on your phone as a backup and that's available very cheaply, or you can use an Airlo app or something like that, that can usually get you through whenever there's a brief, you know, unexpected outage of the internet.
You just remind me, I got some of the cheapest data I've ever had when I landed in Da Nang Airport. I think it was like $13 for something ridiculous, like 40 gigs, 50 gig. It was just so much. I had no issues the whole time I
Yeah,
was
I can't
there.
remember the prices, but it's very affordable. So basically just like grab a SIM card somewhere, and you'll be covered no matter where you are.
Great. Okay. Second thing, digital nomads after the internet, they want to know, where can I work? What are some great places to work in Hoi An?
Yeah, there are a lot of them. So there are tons and tons and tons of cafes all throughout Hoi An. So a lot of them you can work at. Some of them are more Vietnamese style, some of them are more Western style. But you can usually cobble together a few places to work just by virtue of needing a cup of coffee. I also have been a member of Hub Hoi An on and off for the last few years, which is a co-working space based in Hoi An, obviously. And they've just moved to a new space, which has sweeping rice field views. It's very beautiful, and the community there is really flourishing. So especially if you're sort of a newbie, or you're traveling solo, or you're, you know, you haven't been to Hoi An before and don't already know people who are going to be there, it is a great place to sort of land, get your bearings, and meet some cool people.
Yeah, when I was there, they had just moved to their new location, and I was so sad I didn't get to see more of that community flourish. But yeah, it seems to already be a favorite with a lot of people.
Yeah, they do. They also have like a lot of, it's not only a great workspace, but they're also doing a great job bringing in activities, breath work and ice baths, and games nights and stuff like that. So I think it's only going to grow from here. That's great.
Fantastic. What are some of your other favorite places to work, or even favorite cafes where you were working with a cup of coffee?
Yeah, there are a bunch. I'm trying to think which ones to shout out. I would say my favorite cup of coffee in town is at a little place called 145 in Cam Chow. And so they do a great coffee. They have a very cute dog, and good tables and Wi-Fi for working. So I've enjoyed being there quite a bit. There are a number of places down by the beach. I've worked from Seven Suns Coffee Shop in Ambang a few times. There is,
That's one of the biggest beaches, if I recall, right? I'll bang.
yes, down by the beach. It doesn't have a beach view, that one, but another place called Sound of Silence does. The Wi-Fi there can be a little up and down, so maybe do go there for working when you can do things offline. But it has beautiful view, and so it's a really nice place to sort of get inspired if you're doing creative work. And then there are a few other places in town, but I actually would want to double check which ones are still there and which ones are still allowing it. There are a few places where because tourism is back and they've gotten more crowded now than they were during the pandemic era when I was there a lot. I'm hesitant to shout out a couple by name because I know they're trying to sort of keep things from getting too overloaded with laptops.
I will say I did a Google search, like, where can I work in Hoi An? And Rosie's Cafe came up, and I went to Rosie's. It's a great spot, but it is crowded. Like, it's become one of those places on the map. So I felt I could only go when they first opened and maybe stay for maximum 1 hour after actually eating there. And then I just left. So I think Rosie's is too crowded if you find that in the search, but it is a nice
Yes,
place
they're
for
a great
brunch.
example of that. The brunch there is spectacular, but I don't know that I'd go there to try to work anymore just because they're looking for turnover and things like that. The great thing about Hoi An though is there are so many options that even if you go and just spend an hour and a cup of coffee at one, then you can sort of just sort of cafe hop all day and just get constant change of scenery.
I did like the Cafe Nourish, which I think is still open. I just checked, and they had a nice like second floor overlooking the downstairs where you could work. It was a bit noisy. There was construction going on at the time, which I think happens a lot in different parts of Hoi An. But I would shout out Nourish as well. And
Yeah,
another
they're
one,
great.
yeah.
Oh no, go ahead.
Oh, Good Eats. Another friend invited me to a place called Good Eats. That was actually good for working. It sounds like a lunch spot, but it was more brunchy. And the only thing is these places do seem to close at 4 p.m. or 5 p.m. So as someone who might get a late start, you may need to find yourself moving after 5 to a different place.
That's true. And that's actually like one thing I would call out about Hoi An is that it's so I'm something of a night owl. Hoi An is a really great place to be if you were a morning person. Like all the locals go to the beach at like 4 a.m. like before the sun is up. Um cafe like everything is open by 7 a.m. for a lot of the like local businesses and stuff like that. If you were a morning person, it's gonna be a dream for you because there'll be no more waiting for things to open. But a lot of that is also because it does get so hot midday that you have to be careful about if you're trying to go somewhere, a business might be closed midday while people take a break for the hottest part of the day. And like you said, a lot of things will sort of close up earlier and finish before the evening. So it's something to keep an eye out for.
One evening you can go down to the old town, although I don't feel that there's a lot of like big clubs or night spots that go late into the evening in Hoi An. That feels more like a Da Nang thing for me, but I'm not sure.
I
Are
think
there
if you're
late
looking
night
to rage,
clubs?
you'll probably be able to do it better in Da Nang than in Hoi An. But Hoi An actually has quite a few bars, pubs. There are plenty of like places to have a good night out in Hoi An. Just maybe
Craft
not any sort
beer
of
as
crazy Berlin
well.
style. Yeah.
I found really good pizza. Also, there's like I was surprised by some of the cuisine, apart from the beautiful Vietnamese food.
Yeah, the Vietnamese food is spectacular, and you have it on like the full spectrum from just like noodles at the tiny stand by the side of the road with the red plastic chairs, which is phenomenal. And then you also have higher end places like Mua and Tak, where you can get a sort of like gourmet version, something that's a little bit fancier and in a beautiful setting and more cuisine oriented. And so it's nice to have sort of that full spectrum of what Vietnamese food can be. And then so many different Western and fusion options all throughout. Yeah, you can eat pretty much anything and eat very well there. So
Yeah, I loved that variety as someone who's, the digital nomads tend to start finding all these different cuisines around the world. And when you find that there are so many in one place, you want to return, I'd say, again and again to that place.
it's true. And I think it also helps if you're planning to stay, a lot of nomads will want to stay for a month, 2 months, 3 months, and sort of do the longer stay. And at that point, it is nice to be able to vary up what you're eating. And so like you could definitely eat 3 straight months of Vietnamese food and be very happy. But also if you want to throw in, great Indian food from Ganesh or great pizza or some friends just opened a new place called Mosaic, which is doing sort of Western fusion tapas style stuff, which is really good. You can get the full range and sort of mix things up. So if you have a longer stay planned, I think it means you'll never get bored.
Yeah, I remember finding, I'm going to get this wrong, but I remember finding even this very specific type of hamburger that they serve in Minneapolis. I think it was called the Lucy the Lucy Juicy Burger, something like that. I was just walking down the street in Google Maps in Hoi An, and I'm like, this is so interesting. And also some of the best vegan food I've ever had at a place called Peanuts. Again, just looking at Google Maps. I'm not a vegan, but I kept going back to that place. It was so good.
I'm not either, but there actually are a ton of really good vegan and vegetarian oriented restaurants in Hoi An. So if that's something that you incorporate into your diet, you'll be very well taken care of in Hoi An. And even as an avowed meat eater, I was frequently going to the sort of veggie oriented places just because they're really good.
Yeah. And also, I have to bring something up that I don't think people think about when they go to these digital nomad places, but it's actually a really great benefit of Hoi An, and it's pretty unique. It is known for tailoring and people coming to get their clothes made to fit. So can you talk more about that in Hoi An?
Yes, so you like can't throw a rock in Hoi An without hitting a tailor shop. They're everywhere, with pros and cons. So the great thing is that you can go in, you can get something custom made. They'll have options for things you want, or you can just bring pictures or examples. I've even, I once just brought this dress that I really, really love, but it was so old and worn out after being washed 10 million times. And I just asked if they could recreate it, and they could in 24 hours. It was great. And so you can get, I went to a wedding there during the pandemic and had a dress made for that. So that I had something a little more formal, which I don't generally travel with. And actually this past spring, some friends had a themed birthday party. So I got a dress made as part of a costume that I was wearing, which was fun too. So I would say it is a really great place if you're getting like sort of one-off things or just want to have something that's custom made and fit to your body. Like that's a fun experience too, especially if you're sick of buying off the rack and like it never quite fits exactly the way. Like they do the full like measure you in every part, and you'll go back for multiple fittings to make sure it fits perfectly. So that's a really cool experience. I had some fantasies early on that like I would go and just have an entire wardrobe custom made. And I don't know that I'd recommend that because a lot of it is just sort of quick turnaround stuff. If you're looking to have something really special made, or you want pieces that are going to have a longer lifespan, I would say shop around a little bit when you get there and sort of evaluate quality, because some places are just meant to be like turning out quick fun things for tourists who are in town for 2 days, and others are more quality oriented and more interested in creating things that will actually last beyond just a few wears. I will say the whole experience made me really, really respect fashion design in a way I hadn't anticipated, because while some of the tailor shops do handle a lot of the design, others are going at it from more of a, I guess, a seamstress approach where they're just making exactly what you ask for. And so you suddenly have to know what to ask for. And do I want a button there, or do I want a zip, or where should it stop and how long should it be? And yeah, the experience was really fun and made me really respect fashion designers in a way I hadn't anticipated before.
To say the same thing. And I went in pretty clueless. Thank you, Pinterest. You can find a lot of things on Pinterest if you just can't think of ideas for what you want to have made. But it is something I still wear a lot of what I had made there. I had a few things, and I just, yeah, it's very unique when you get back to where you live and you're like, I'm so glad I took the time to do that. And Hoi An is just one of those special places where you can.
Yeah, and it is always fun later when you're bopping around another part of the world and someone says, "Oh, I love your dress," and you're like, "I had it custom made."
Yes, yes.
Makes
You
you
just
sound much more glamorous than you are.
Yes, you're just reminding me too of like being in Hoi An, and I think a lot of people go to Thailand, for example, or Bali. They imagine like I want to relax, I want to get a massage on the beach or wherever. And Hoi An is another place you can do that. I mean, Vietnam in general has so many spa services available, and I mean they also go around the world setting up spas and salons as well. So it's a place you can also enjoy these kind of things when you're looking to relax, or you've had like a hard day, or you're feeling like stuck in your house and getting you need to stretch. Lots of yoga, lots of just healing practices you can find. So I also enjoy that about Hoi An.
Yeah, absolutely. I will say I really miss my weekly massages now that I'm not in Southeast Asia anymore because they are significantly more expensive in the US and Europe. But that is a really great sort of activity. All the various spas in town offer different flavors, but all very good. And yeah, like you said, there's also there are a lot of options for like fitness oriented stuff. I go to Pilates program while I'm there that I really love. There's a ton of great yoga studios with beautiful views. There's also like HIIT classes and beachfront sort of fitness TRX type stuff. Yeah, running groups, all kinds of things. So whatever you're looking for fitness wise, you can probably find it. Actually, I went to my first aerial yoga class this spring, and that was in Hoi An.
Lovely. Yeah,
Yeah.
I really think Hoi An is, like you said, it's a place that has so much of everything, but it's on that smaller scale where it's a manageable size. But if you really want that big night out where you feel anonymous in a crowd, you can still go over to Da Nang and enjoy that there. So I think it's a
Mhm.
great, it offers just a great balance for digital nomads.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's very accessible. I mean, it helps that people are really friendly. There is my Vietnamese is not a particularly accessible language, but Hoi An, because there's enough of a tourist infrastructure there, it is easy enough to find English speakers or people who can sort of help you get by, or at least a tolerance for the charades I sometimes have to do to explain what I'm looking for. But uh, but yeah, Hoi An is a really special place filled with very cool people. And it's an interesting mix too, because the local Hoi An scene is very cool, but it also tends to draw a lot of sort of cool, interesting, younger Vietnamese people from Hanoi and Saigon. I met a few people this year who were just like, yeah, I just wanted a sort of more chill lifestyle. So I moved down here from the city. And with that, they bring a lot of like creativity and interest in media and the arts and all kinds of cool stuff. And so I think there's an interesting sort of creative thread that goes through Hoi An too.
Yeah, when I was there, I participated in a 10K run. Actually, I did the 5K and my partner did a 10K. But I mean, we didn't even, it was very last minute and we connected with some of the local people in the run. And it was nice to see this like burgeoning running community through the rice fields and starting so early that it's not so hot yet. And that's actually one of my last questions. What would you say is the best time to go to Hoi An in the year?
Yeah, that's a good question. Because I was there for so long during the pandemic, I got a chance to see Hoi An in virtually every season, really, which is nice to have that base of knowledge. So typically, most people will try to go during high season, which tends to be from February, usually around the time that Tet or Lunar New Year wraps up. A lot of things will be. Tet is a really fun time to be in Vietnam, but if you're only going for a couple of days, it can get a little dicey because a lot of things will be closed and stuff like that. But typically the high season is from after Tet, typically in early February, through maybe June. I left in May this year and it was already getting to be quite a scorcher of a summer. So I would say once you get deeper into the summer, the heat starts to be an issue if that's something you're sensitive to. And then the rainy season in Hoi An, it varies in different parts of Vietnam, but in Hoi An specifically, it tends to be from maybe late September through, I don't know, December, early January. You can go during the rainy season and it varies year to year. Some years I've heard are not so bad. The year I was there for rainy season, it was very aggressive flood conditions and typhoons and not a particularly easy time to be there. So it depends. You won't be miserable if you're there during rainy season, but it does change the dynamic quite a bit because it rains for real, and with that comes flooding and mold and all the other issues that come up anywhere during a rainy season. So I would say if you're looking for the best, most comfortable weather, I would say February to April is probably your best option, and then May and June are still a nice time to be there. And Hoi An is going to be beautiful in any season, but those might be the ones where people will be most comfortable.
Yeah, I found this year, March and April, like even mid-February felt a little too early because it was still the rainy season. They had a quite a late rainy season this year. So March and April might be your safest bet if you're only going for a couple of months.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Amanda, for teaching us more about about Hoi An and Vietnamese culture. There's so much to explore, and Vietnam, the whole country, is such a jewel. But Hoi An has a special place in my heart, and I think it's for sure the place I'm going to return to first when I go back.
Absolutely. It is a second home might be too strong, but it's definitely a place where I feel at home. And I think most people would. It's beautiful, it's charming, and it's an exciting place to visit.
I think it's definitely a testament to the Vietnamese people and their hospitality. So I'm glad you had such a great experience when you were there and got to bond with the country through the pandemic.
Yeah, it's a really special place filled with super cool people. If you haven't visited yet, I 100% recommend putting it on your list.
Thank you very much. Guys, go check Hoi An out, maybe in March and April as your first look. Bye,
Sounds good.
Amanda.
Thanks for having me. Bye.
Thank you.